Here we are. We are Maverick Mindset, widening the lens of healthcare, looking for unique people that do things a little bit uniquely. And this journey has led us to Cindy Gleaton of Remedy Fitness. We are sitting in her gym on the back of her home, which is so cool. There's windows all around us and mirrors and all this equipment. And we've been having this conversation that we're anxious to share with you guys. I know the girls here, Dr. Sarah and Luna and Melanie. We've got a room full of athletic women here, so I know they are excited to hear what Cindy has to say. You have a unique journey, and as I was looking through your bio, I saw that health and wellness exercise is ingrained in you. So walk us through just a little bit, starting with your mom. You're a local to Charleston, which is a rarity. You're fifth generation. So if you're a Yankee import, it was a long time ago. So with the rest of us imports here, walk us through just briefly kind of what got you to here.
Well, I had a mom who was very much into community and helping the community. She was director of organizational excellence at Roper Hospital in the end, but before that, she was actually a respiratory therapist.
And back when she started with Roper, which everyone around here knows the Roper name.
Probably 40 years ago, yeah.
40 years ago. That was pretty cutting edge to be, exercise and function and movement and structure, that's kind of accepted now. But I would think back then,
no.
She was a trailblazer.
She was primarily dealing with COPD patients and people who were very unhealthy, smoking and not such a good lifestyle. And she developed programming for them and then saw the need for the community to be healthier in general. And moving forward, she came upon a spot on Highway 17, not far from here, that was a racket club that was not doing well, and she helped convince Roper Hospital to buy that racket club. And that was my first intro to a gym or a gymnasium.
She actually talked the hospital group into purchasing a building
so
she could teach exercise?
No, not so she could teach exercise, just for the community. To help the community
to keep the
healthier.
racket club open?
Roper bought it because it was failing. And
to keep it as a racquetball club, so a place that people could exercise, kind of like the old YMCA's?
They changed the name. It was called something Racket Club. I don't even remember what it was called. And I think they named it Roper Health and Wellness.
That's pretty forward thinking when you think about it for Roper to do that back then. They've got such a great reputation here anyways, but to really take their resources and put it into something
It was a gamble.
Yeah.
It was a gamble.
Yeah, for them.
So it was a wonderful facility. I couldn't tell you how long it was when I was like 17 years old. So it was a very long time ago. And it is where other gyms ended up being later. I don't know what year it closed.
And they've expanded and kept on that theme. So your mom was one of those that first planted that seed and somehow motivated them.
And cared. Just cared about the health of the community. That's the big message there, I think. And trying to improve. And you see now, we have walkways and bike pathways, walkways on the bridge. That's huge. So the community's changed a lot since then.
Yeah, you've been here a long time. You trained up, or you were a trainer for a long time, even went to Texas. And didn't you say that they are still doing your same program 24 years later?
Yes, they are. They are. Mm-hmm. I visited them a few years ago, first time in a long time, and then looked online, and there's their muscle conditioning class that I created long ago, still on the schedule. So, and I trained the whole group fitness, how to use weights, heavy weights, and light to heavy weights in an aerobic group fitness kind of room, with classes and stuff. And that is not from me. That came from the firm where I learned it long ago. So that's where a lot of education started as well, with just moving in weights and heart rate, the whole shebang. So that was the early ages of the firm with the Benson sisters.
And when you say firm, what do you mean by that?
The firm they're They were bought out by BMG, but it was a fantastic, ahead of its time, aerobic training with weights programming. There were 2 facilities that were pretty much just the learning ground for making fitness videos.
Okay.
So the fitness videos were all over the U.S. and beyond, and
So they had their VHS cameras, about
The
this
onesies,
big. Fitness videos it's so easy now.
Yeah.
Anyone with a phone can do a fitness video on YouTube, but this was cutting edge, right?
this was cutting edge. And they actually, in the early days, hired actresses to do the leads.
Wow.
And actors. So it was a big deal, and then it kind of morphed into having more of the locals do it.
You've been kind of with the forward thinkers for a while then. First your mom, then you were at this firm, and then you worked for or learned from a guy you described to me. His name was Gary Gray.
Gary Gray, the inventor of this excellent stretch machine right here.
And he was a PT.
He is a PT who trains PTs.
That trains PTs. And it sounds like he was kind of on the cutting edge.
He is very much on the cutting edge still.
And
Lots of programming. He's very forward thinker, very much human movement mechanics, and just a super knowledgeable guy about teaching others how to move, how to address issues that come up in the body. We talked about 3D training. That's from him pretty much, and that's 3-dimensional training, because the body is meant to move. Every single joint in the body and the body itself is made to move in 3 planes of motion. We don't just walk forward. We do move side to side. We rotate. So I like to say, you watch kids on a playground. That's how we adults are supposed to move. We're supposed to be twisting and turning and reaching and lifting and pushing and pulling and jumping and doing all those things. But as we get older, life kind of tames us down and keeps us in this seated position and or walking forward, all this stuff that goes with it. So he is definitely where the 3-dimensional training came from, and that makes so much sense. I mean, every single joint in our body, our spines. I mean, you see our aging population. If you just watch people walk, you see them sitting in a church or sitting anywhere. They're, we're losing it. We're getting here. Gravity's pressing us down, and as we age, we tend to stop being able to rotate and to move like we should be able to move. So.
Well, I found that fascinating talking with you and how you named it Remedy. You're not just trying to get people to do fitness. You want them to get in shape, but you're not just doing that. You're not doing exactly what a PT would do, where you're just dealing with injuries. You kind of combine them. And we talked about that upstream. So we had talked about one particular person that had a shoulder injury. So describe for us, what is your thinking? Like, how do you walk people through? They want to be fit. Some of them are already fit, but this particular person had a bad shoulder injury. So what's different about what you're doing?
Well, looking at the person as a whole, for sure. But of course, when they come in with an injury, which is not always the case, but often it is the case because they've tried a lot of things and nothing's really working, and they're still dealing with this and not having the function that they need, and they want to exercise, they want to move, and they can't. So with that particular client, it was teaching her body range of motion. So she did sit at a desk all day, most of the day, and her body learned one of these habits, and that is this locked up shoulders, upper trap tightness, pretty much what it is, and just kind of forwardness. So when we assessed her, I could see that she didn't have any range of motion up her scapula or her shoulder blades. She could, on the other arm that wasn't affected, she could move and she could reach and she could do things, but when she did that, she couldn't move the shoulder blade through its range of motion. Well, the shoulder blade actually has many, many different ranges of motion, as you know. So we had to start waking that up. And it takes time when they're fired up and in pain. So teaching that range of motion, getting the body to allow more and more of multiple different ranges of motion in that particular joint, And then we also have to address the upper spine with that, which brings us to the whole spine, because you can't just do a piece of the spine. So as I tell a lot of people, the shoulder and the neck and the upper spine are all very related. If you have this forward posture, you have the upper traps locked up, you're going to end up with either a shoulder impingement issue, you're going to end up with a neck issue or pain, or upper back issues. And I bet you've seen that a bunch.
A few times.
They come in like this, the like fight or flight mode constantly. Like, I don't understand why it hurt. You're like,
And they don't see it. That's what's so interesting. I've never had a person that had upper trap tightness that knew it, that knew that they were dominant here. And it's pretty common to be overusing your traps, and that's a muscle balance issue. And that's, they're over tight, and they are a larger muscle compared to their opposite, because it's all about relationships across a joint with a muscle. If you have tightness on one side, the front being forward, then the back side is going to be long and weak, and you can never have proper function of a joint of the muscles across the joint if you don't have the proper length.
And this particular person was in good shape, right?
Excellent shape. She was an avid exerciser her entire life, in her 60s at the time. And, she didn't know why this was happening to her.
So you incorporated a rehabilitative balancing workout with a full body workout.
Absolutely.
She was continuing to... Explain that a little bit.
We always try to address the pain first. Somebody comes in with pain, if they do, that's not always the case. Then we address the pain first and deal with that, and then do as much as we can, and while we're also working the rest of the body as well. But to back up a little bit, I also try to retrain or teach people just some basics about their body when they first come in. Like, even though she was an avid exerciser her entire life, you name it, she did it, as far as the different fitness modalities out there. But she didn't have core integrity, as I call it. Like most, I've rarely come across ones that do.
what do you mean by core integrity?
Most people are more concerned about their rectus abdominis muscles, or the six-pack muscles that everyone knows, right?
Washboards, yeah.
Yeah, so everybody thinks, I'm working my abs. Most people are working their abs, often when I see them, but they're not working their transverse abdominis, the deep core muscle that's our God-given corset. And that is what gives our core integrity. That is what holds in all of our internal contents and helps to stabilize our spines in the proper position, so we're not lordotic or arched back with our hips tilted forward. So when people don't have the knowledge and the true function of their deep core, as I call it, and I'm talking about the transverse abdominis when I say that primarily, then they lose integrity, and everything's kind of affected, especially the lower back. When you don't have that core integrity, the lower back's affected. When you have the lower back affected, you have the upper back affected. When you have the upper back affected, we go back to the shoulder joint. So one thing affects another, so you really have to kind of look at the whole picture. And nobody's the same, but there's some similarities across,
So if someone comes to you, one of the things you do is you start to assess where their strengths are, where their weakness is, literally.
Right.
And then you design a workout to help get them balanced.
Yes, down the line. But first it is teaching them more about, as I call, 3 points of integrity is what I teach. So, but it takes time, like just teaching them about their core and how to access that deep core muscle and what to do. And I don't just mean when they're exercising. I'm talking about when they're walking out the door, when they're driving in the car, when they're picking up their children, that they are engaging that muscle and teaching the neural input, because that's really kind of back to where I really start with people. We're changing the neuromuscular integration of the body. We don't want to do the same thing we've been doing all the time. That's how you keep going back into the physical therapy round and around and around again, because you're not changing anything. You're going back to the lifestyle you lived before, with, if there's no core, then you're in a lordotic curve. You get this effect here, and you go back, and whether you're doing your grass, mowing your grass and running lawn equipment, or you're like one of my captains is constantly lifting cases of things in and out of his boat. That's a lot on the body, and you keep doing these things in repetition, and you never change anything, you're going to get injured.
Mm-hmm. And so with this person with a shoulder injury, you said, and I happen to know this person, so I know that they have to sit at a desk for their job. How would you try to get them to do that less, or just work out in such a way that it was less detrimental to them?
You mean sit at the desk less?
Uh-huh.
That would always be great for all of us, but that's not real practical when we have to,
Sitting is the new
pay to
smoking.
live. We have to have an income, so it's important. So it's teaching the integrity. So we talked about the core. That's a lot in itself. So I usually give that the first time and give people examples of exercises and examples of how to tune into that muscle first off, how to use it when they're driving in the car, when they're walking, when they're going to pick something up, whatever they're doing. From there, I try to teach them about shoulder integrity. For her, it would definitely be shoulder integrity and core integrity first. There's only 3. There's not a bunch, but there's 3. So it's core integrity, shoulder integrity, and hip integrity.
And when you said the 3-point, is that what you're referring to? Mm-hmm. Okay, the shoulder, core, and the hips. And so you're working, as a rule, that's kind of your foundation for getting everybody in.
Correct. I want to teach them how to tap into using these parts of their bodies in the healthy way, not in the habitual way. So of course, the first thing I'm doing is addressing pain, if there's any pain. And then habits. Some people are knee lockers. That's a whole nother thing. So we want to break that bad habit. That, when you lock your knees, not only do you go bone on bone on your knee joint, but that makes you take your muscles out of it, you take your glutes out of it, and then you're going up and hinging on the lower back. So then when you hinge on the lower back, you're putting pressure on the lower back, of course, and the knee. The core totally lets go with that position. Mm-hmm. So there's no core integrity with that. So we want to break that habit. I'm never going to get anywhere with them. When,
like you said, knee locker, when would they lock their knees?
Standing.
So if they're standing.
Mm-hmm. So definitely not going to do it sitting, right? So when they're standing and waiting, hanging out, like if we were standing right now talking many people would stand there with a extend, not just an extended knee, but extended into hyperextension. Bone on bone.
Hip popped on one side, extending that way.
Often it goes with that. If it's one knee locking, then it's exactly that the hip is
You've
cocked
seen
to
me
the
stand.
side. But some people will stand with both knees locked. Mm-hmm. And then that, boom, right to the low back. So we just want to address those kind of things. And for other people, it's just that they're living here, especially with the anxiety today. People are we hold our stress up here. Pretty much all of us hold our stress up here. So when we have moments, what do we do? We get scared. What do we do? We do this, right? So for those people that are up here, if they're working on computers, almost all of them have some of that, at least some degree. So definitely want to address that.
You found a way to decrease people's stress?
Empowering them helps.
Okay.
About their own human machine. I do like that. But the shoulder integrity has a lot to do with overactive upper traps and very weak lower traps that do the scapular depression.
And when you say empowering, I assume at least in part, what you mean is they're not even aware they're doing it.
Right.
It's a habit where you can't change everybody's life stresses or the seasons, but you can
Redirect
teach
it.
them, redirect it.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Mm-hmm. Redirect it.
So I want to redirect it to, I call it as like, if I ever walk into a room with some of my clients, I'll automatically see them put their shoulder blades in their back pockets as I tell them.
They see you and
then they're like, oh, shoulder in the back
I
pockets.
see people all the time. I mean, like, thankfully, my mom, when I was little, she played piano, so she was always like, sit up straight, do the things, and I was like, okay, mom, like whatever. And then now I'm so glad she did that. Being a chiropractor, I'm also like, oh, your spine integrity and things like that. And so when I see people slouching, I'm like, your poor spine, like just do this. Or I see them and I'm like, come on, get that going, decompress that spine, stand up straight. Actually,
Great that your mom
Yeah,
instill
I'm
that in you.
so glad she did that. I see my friends walking around like that now, and they're like this. I'm like, oh no, like now I know all the mechanics of what's happening there. Please sit up straight. Like it's gonna just be so much better for you in the long run. So I'm very glad she installed that in me.
So playing the piano is a good one because, I mean, there's probably some people that play kind of sloppily with their bodies like this, but I bet most people play the piano in that structured,
very grand way of like,
so
let
it's
everything go.
shoulder integrity, shoulder and spine integrity. They're there playing.
I'm not great at playing the piano. In fact, I quit my piano lessons, but went to the flute. But for the time being, I'm glad she taught me that there.
It's interesting that you say that because it makes me think about something I use as an analogy. I happen to have a ballerina that I train, but I've had so many people say to me when I try to teach them about this, when you take your arms up, because we often use the cable machine to work our lower traps, and we're driving just the shoulder girdle down to use the lower traps. And so many people will say, I can't take my arm up and not lift my shoulder. I say, yes, you can. And I say, think about a ballerina. Have you ever seen the Nutcracker? Do they do this? Do they lift up their shoulders like this? No, they're beautiful. The shoulders are in their back pockets every single time. That's how we're supposed to move.
I bet that's like really eye-opening to a lot of your clients as well. Like me, I've always been kind of like, okay, if this is how you do something, this is like the way to do it. I've always tried to do it like the very proper way. And so I think that'd be kind of almost like mind-shattering for me if I was like, oh, I've been doing it well this whole time, and you're like, actually, you haven't been. Like I'm sure that is just much mental, like re-changing and focus versus just doing the physical activities with everything.
That is exactly it, the focus, and that comes from the awareness. They have to be aware that there's something that needs to change. And so then we can teach them neuromuscularly how to change it. You have to first know there's a problem and then know how to change it, because some people might realize they have an issue but they don't know what to do about it. So that's what we do first. So whatever that may be, that point of integrity that's not working like it should, we want to fine tune that, and it takes time. It's a numbers game because you're retraining the nervous system. It's not just muscular, it's neural first. You have to change the nervous system first.
People always ask us, they're like, oh, I think it's a muscle problem or this, like, which do you think? I'm like, oh, that's tough, because for the most part, muscle's just a piece of meat until the nerve system fires at it. So
That's
I'm like,
exactly right.
I don't know how to answer this question, but let's work at both.
It's the nerves that tell the muscles what to do, and it's the muscles that moves the bones. Yeah.
So let's say somebody is watching this and they say, okay, I think Cindy's got something that I need, but maybe they don't live close enough. I mean, Charleston is kind of a big area now, and driving here would be tough. Do they have to come here for the whole thing? Can they ever come and you assess them and then give them homework and then reassess them? What options do people have?
I like to touch them first. I like to lay hands on them initially so I can see how their scapula is moving, if that's the issue, see what their spine's doing. We could do it over FaceTime or however, but they're going to get a little bit more out of one-on-one, and then they can take it and do the homework.
So someone could come to you like once a week, you give them homework, they go do the homework, come back, and so you're monitoring and assessing them that way?
Exactly. Yeah, and that could be done. The first one could initially be done online as well, but I'd rather be in person. But then even the check-ins, like if somebody was far away, it could be distant.
Okay. Let's say there's other trainers out there that say, okay, you clearly have something to teach me. Maybe even PTs, maybe even chiros. I'm even like, oh wow, I bet I could learn so much from you. I've already learned from you, right? Because as you said earlier, you can't learn it all. I mean, the human body's
amazing.
Yeah, you can't. And everybody that comes to you is unique. You may have the formula to fix the last 100 people that seem just like them, and then you get the one, and there's something you haven't figured out.
Right.
And you might have already figured that one out. So that interests me. How would I send a patient here, and what could she figure out? What could I learn so the next time I could handle that one until I got to another one I couldn't handle? That's how experience works, I guess. So how would a trainer or a professional that wanted to learn from you, how would that work?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't really thought about that. I'm up for suggestions.
Okay. Because you've trained. That's not new to you.
No.
You've trained a lot. In Texas. They're still doing your same thing 24
That's right.
years later.
Right. I mean, I've even trained physical therapists, to be honest with
Yeah.
you, about some of this
I
stuff.
figured
So yeah, just come spend some time with me.
Okay. So you're open to that if
Sure.
a professional wants to come in and say, all right, teach me on my own body, or teach me with the patient, or do you work with other professionals if they send somebody to you?
Absolutely. Yes.
And you can kind of teach them that way. So if we sent you, or anyone sends you a patient and says, I've got this shoulder or this neck, it's just not getting any better, or they're having to come to me more often than they really should, can you do something? And then teach me what you did.
Sure. I have a previous client who was a surgeon who sent another new surgeon that came on board to one of the hospitals who had neck surgery. And his posture was pretty off. And poor surgeons, here they are, doing this for hours and hours and hours a day. So he's a great example of that. He came to me probably a year and a half ago, and is making great strides. So.
Well, this is such a comfortable environment to do it. Not only do you have the equipment, it's on the back of your home. It's a beautiful backyard. It just has such a
This is my
feel.
ultimate goals here. Like,
Yeah.
I would love to have this. Luna and I were talking earlier, and she's like, if I had this here, she's like, I would not leave my house. Yeah, I'm already a little bit of a more introvert, but yeah, this would keep me here all the time. It's amazing.
Well, I have a lot of clients that really appreciate the birds that are flying around out there. You probably can't see them, but there's a little hummingbird coming to feed her here, and there's a bluebird right there on the feeder in the window.
Yeah, and you're in such
So
a
that
beautiful
helps.
neighborhood here in Mount Pleasant, so it's just so
It's a good
comfortable.
spot. Yeah, near Shim Creek. It's a good spot.
Okay. Before I ask how people get a hold of you, is there anything else that you could tell us, or any questions we haven't asked?
I have a question. Have you ever found someone, I feel like I kind of already know the answer, that let's say has great core integrity, but like really crap hip or shoulder? Or is it kind of like, if you don't really have one, you don't really have all of them type of deal?
Not at all.
Okay.
No, they can definitely be. So athletes that have grown up doing sports, they are the only ones that I see that actually have core integrity.
Okay. They got that core integrity, but they may
yeah.
not have that, like the baseball
Right.
pitcher may not have that core shoulder
Right.
integrity.
And then often, even with golfers, hips can be
Yes.
tight. And with golf, we need some flexibility and 3D motion of our hips.
So you can conceivably help somebody with their golf game by helping their body.
Oh yes. Oh yes. There's a lot of components to golf, but one of the big ones is spinal rotation. But there's also hip rotation, elongation if they're right-handed, elongation of the right hip flexor, which is, we didn't even talk about the hip integrity, but just right now, sitting here, all of our hip flexors are shortened. Our glutes, the opposite muscle, they're lengthened. So that's an imbalance going on. If we do that all day, it's definitely an issue. Weak glutes is something I see a lot of. And tight hip flexors. So that is part of the hip integrity equation.
Okay, so someone that's maybe struggling to get their swing right, they might be compensating, they just can't get it. Not that I know much about golf, but I have studied enough to know that you've got to be pretty good in your fluid movement to be able to hit the ball right.
Yes, and if there's tightness in a joint, whether it be at the spine, which is a big one, or at the hip, and I see a lot of at the calf actually, with that, then that's going to hinder the golf game. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to improve your golf game with.
This is a big golf area
Yeah.
too. So if you guys are watching this and you want to improve your golf game, she's your lady.
Yeah, one thing I see a lot of with golfers is the forward lean. They're leaning forward, which is most of the time tight calves, probably some tight hamstrings, but tight hip flexors. So definitely something to address. You have to use your glutes as your foundation. That's part of the hip integrity. The glutes need to be our foundation. We're not supposed to walk around on our 4 feet and our toes, using our knees, because that's basically what happens. We're supposed to be using our buttocks. But when we sit for long periods of time for work or just lifestyle, then we lose that. It's an imbalance.
You can help them get that back.
Yeah, they can help themselves.
And I love that you talked about a 16-year-old, and then off camera you're talking about an 84-year-old. So it's not too late to make improvements.
Even 88, yes.
88.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Never too late. Never ever too late. Especially just to have a better quality of life, to be able to do the things you enjoy. My 84-year-old walks every day for several miles, and that's life-giving for her.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it a bummer? You work so hard to retire, to have a nice life, and then physically you can't do what you wanted to do.
It happens all the time, and
Yeah.
and people retire and sit back in the recliner and just start clicking.
I think they get that mindset of like, oh, I'm old. This is just what's supposed to happen, you know? And it's like it's totally not.
No,
you can take control of it. I see a lot of ultra runners and stuff like that. Not that I would ever do it. I support those that do it, but they're out there and they're like 70-plus-year-olds. They're like, yep, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna run 60 miles at this 24-hour event. I'm like, oh my gosh. That's insane.
I know,
But
and
I'm
triathlons even.
Yeah, I'm like, I admire him. Like, I hope I'm doing, like, have that same mindset. I don't know if I'll ever get into that amount of running, but
We have some
really
80-year-olds that
impressive.
are running the bridge every year.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Not something I'd recommend, but you know, it's something that brings them joy. So that's what matters. How do we find our joy? How do we keep our joy? We stay active and healthy and have joints that move through their full range of motion. That is key.
Yeah, we've got these beautiful beaches. What good is it if you can't walk on the beaches and the golf courses and all the fun stuff that Charleston has to offer?
That's true. There's plenty of outdoor activity here.
I know you don't advertise. You're kind of a well-kept secret, and you do by referral relationship. So if someone says, "Okay, I want to kind of check out what Cindy's doing," what's their next steps?
Oh, they can shoot me a text, give me a call. I'll call them when I have a moment, and we can set something up.
Okay, and we'll make that available.
Okay, great.
Any last word of encouragement you want to say to somebody that maybe they're a little bit older and they hurt and they're taking the little painkiller and like my knee's probably about to go and I'm probably gonna have to have surgery, and then just the typical lifestyle. Any thought you have for them?
Oh, that's a big one. There's a lot to that because sometimes a knee does need replaced, and sometimes a hip does need to be replaced. But sometimes it's also just getting back to the balance across these joints. And so often with the knees, it's the buttocks being weak. And I'll start people with this, that the two best friends to the knees are the core and the glutes. That's the best thing you can do for your knees, is to have strong knees and hips. And that also goes for the lower back, which is a very common area of injury. So I would just tell people to move, first off. If they're in pain, definitely address the pain, address the inflammation, and work on range of motion. So a lot of people forget about flexibility. Now with the yoga craze, that's not so much, kind of that's going another direction, but we want that balance. So we need the strength. We've got to have the strength, but we also have to have the flexibility and to have that proper range of motion of a joint. So if they don't know how to do that, try to get some help with that. Give me a call if you'd like. But many people can probably help with just the basics of that.
Well, I know I could probably use your help. So I have enjoyed this. You're clearly an expert in your field and a one of a kind. So Charleston's lucky to have you.
I want to put you a little bit on the spot here, if you're okay with it. We were talking a lot about the core strength here. Are you able to do like a 2-second engage our core for everyone watching here, or is that way too complicated because it's everywhere?
No, I'll show you what I teach every person that walks in my door.
Perfect. I'm sure everyone would love to just be a little bit more like, how can we just start?
It's the first thing that everyone will learn.
Okay.
I'll get you to take your hand in this position and push your fingers around your belly button.
Okay.
And stand tall, of course, and cough. Did you feel the tightening when you cough? Mm-hmm. That is your transverse abdominis.
Okay.
So do that again, cough, and hold that tightening. And how long can you hold that tightening? Start with that stabilization, that integrity. So what you just felt, right, is that muscle just drew in. So it's an interesting muscle because its job is compression, like a corset. So when we did that cough, we went from just it being kind of out here to, ooh, integrity. That just supported our back big time.
And is it better for people to do this standing, sitting, mix it up?
Any position.
Any position.
You can do that one standing, sitting, lying down.
Okay.
I try to get people to do it in the car when they're driving. That's part of their homework.
Okay.
Health through coughing.
Through coughing, yeah. Health through coughing
Get
with
bronchitis
integrity.
and it will work your core like no other.
It's a wake-up call. It really is. For most people, they're like, I never knew I had that muscle. I didn't know I was supposed to use it. And that muscle should be engaged before you ever try to do any kind of abdominal work. And that is where a lot of people get into trouble. They'll just go right to crunches and they never even think about engaging that muscle first. So that's
Excellent. I'm going to practice that today.
yay.
Thank you so
Yay.
much.
Great.
Thank you guys.